Hello, welcome to my bookshelf, and today I'm going to share all my thoughts and feelings on I, Robot by Isaac Asimov. If you're not aware, this is a science fiction short story collection, but the interesting thing about this book is that all the short stories are interconnected in a way by this overarching narrative. Basically, the premise of this book being told is Dr. Susan Calvin, a robo-psychologist, is about to retire, and so she's being interviewed to divulge some interesting stories about her time with the company US Robots and Mechanical Men Incorporated, aka US Robots. So I decided that the first part of this video would have some spoiler-free thoughts, just in case you haven't read it, but I will delve into spoilers later on, so be warned. And I figured that the spoiler-free section would have the book up, and as soon as I put the book down, that would be when the spoilers can run free. So as far as my general thoughts on this book, I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. I really liked this story. I thought that this book was both intellectual and funny and entertaining at the same time. It really worked on a couple different levels, and I just found it really enjoyable overall. So each short story is kind of like a vignette delving into different issues revolving around robotics and what can go wrong with robots and how we can fix any problems that come up because we're living in a world where robotics is a thing. So one of the big things about iRobot is Asimov's 3 laws of robotics. The first one being that a robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. That is essential. That is the most important law that's been impressioned in them, so they can't, above all, break this one. The second law is a robot must obey the orders given it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law, which again just shows you how important the first law is. The third law being a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second laws. It's kind of a pyramid where the first law is most important, second law is second important, and third law is third important, and anything else is just not as important as the 3 laws. I thought that Asimov was really creative in coming up with these 3 laws to ensure that they didn't just become like evil robots trying to take over the world, because that's been played out a lot. I mean, I don't know if it was played out back in the 40s and 50s when he wrote this, but because I feel like a lot of times when you think about stories revolving around robots, the robots are inevitably evil. Asimov doesn't really tackle the issue of robots being evil because they can't, because of the 3 laws. It's a really interesting idea to just delve more into what the world would look like because of robots with these 3 laws instead of like the worst case scenario. So as you can tell, this book is pretty philosophical and intellectual and deep on a lot of levels, but like I said, there's a lot of really interesting, fun scenes in here and a lot of really funny imagery as well. And actually, my 2 favorite characters, Donovan and Powell, they're basically fieldmen that test out robots in new situations and make sure that nothing bad happens along the way. And they are hilarious together. They're definitely by far the funniest part of this book. And kind of going back to the short stories, some of them are set up as almost like logic puzzles for you to figure out along with the characters. And I thought that it did it really well because I think sometimes they try to make you figure out, who done it, but the problem with those that I have anyway is that I feel like we're never given sufficient information to actually figure out who done it. And I don't think that's really fair for us as a reader because you try to get us to figure out with the detective, who committed the murder, but we're not really given all the information to make that call. We're kind of just given information slowly, just like the detectives are, and so it's, I don't know, to me it's not as fun because I know that I can't really guess because I don't have all the information yet. Because if we had all the information, we would have solved it by now. Presumably. But the nice thing about this is that I was able to, think ahead and try to figure out what was going on. Like, why were these robots acting the way they were? Because that's kind of how they're set up. Basically, each short story gives us a different kind of robot or a different way that the laws are being enacted. And you get to try to figure out what's really going on here and how can we fix the problem at hand. I thought that Asimov did a really good job of that. I would say the one bad thing about this book is that not everyone is going to like the book because of all the reasons I just said there. It's kind of too intellectual maybe at parts for some people. I think I definitely know people who try to read to get away from having to use their brains. They just want something to entertain them, and they don't want to have to actually think about it too hard. And this definitely makes you think a lot throughout. So for that reason, I could see why some people might not be interested in this story, but I do think that if you want a book to make you think, that this is a really good book to pick up and read. So like I said before, I gave it about like 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I took away that half a star because it is a short story collection, and because of that, it's pretty much impossible to come up with a short story collection that doesn't have some short stories in it that you're not really a huge fan of. It's really hard to have like consistently good short stories throughout, and they were just, I would say about like 2 or 3 that just, they were just kind of like below the bar. Like the other ones raised it really high, and they were just like, this is okay. And it's really hard because I wouldn't necessarily take them out because they do delve into really important topics for later on in the book, because the nice thing about this too is that they build off of each other. And these stories are told chronologically, so you get to see the slow progression of Robots, starting with the first one that came out in 1992, which, shout out 1992, the year I was born. And then it eventually goes to, I think it's like 2064, so we're really jumping far into the future, and obviously robotics has advanced quite a bit in that time. So they all delve into really important issues, and they do kind of build on each other in a really cool way. And I would say the one thing that also saved those stories that I wasn't a huge fan of was that the characters in them were really good. And I just loved the interaction that they had with each other, and it really made it an enjoyable read, even if what's actually happening to them and the situation that they're in isn't really that exciting to read about. So, not that bad overall, which is why I only took off half a star. It's still pretty good overall if you're interested in science fiction and deep thinking. And I think that's all I have to say without actually spoiling any of the short stories, so I will now be putting down this book and delving into some spoilers, so you have been warned.